Hello and welcome to Art for Everybody and this third part of my oil painting course for absolute beginners. If you've never been here before, my name is Evi Steiner-Böhm. I'm an artist from Germany and I also have two friends who sometimes assist me in my videos, and they are called Pedro and Rosa. In this third part, I would like to show you another way of layering an oil painting, and that is with a so-called grisaille. Grisaille is a French word and actually means monotony, but in painting it means a monochrome painting that only consists of black, white and different shades of grey, so that it looks like a black and white photography. And now, without further ado, let's have a look how this all worked. A grisaille was mainly used by the old masters, as we call the artists between the 14th and 18th century. Since they didn't have our variety of pigments to express form, they concentrated on very contrasted lights and darks in a painting. The grisaille, which by the way could also be done in other colors like burnt sienna or green, was used to build up the form before color was added. So when the grisaille was finished, thin colored glazes were then applied to this black and white layer, and a wonderful shimmering and three-dimensional effect was achieved. The advantage, of course, was that very little paint was needed to create the forms, as most of this work was already done with the grisaille. This was, of course, a big advantage, especially with very expensive pigments such as ultramarine, which had to be transported far across the sea. Traditionally, egg tempera was used for this underpainting for the simple reason that it was the common painting medium until then. The disadvantage was that egg tempera, similar to acrylic paint, dries very quickly and therefore cannot be easily blended. Egg tempera paints also look dull when they dry. So people experimented with the new oil paints and realized that by glazing with oil paint, they could compensate for the disadvantages of egg tempera paints. And over time, people learned that the same effect could be achieved with diluted oil paint. Likewise, artists began to work with colored imprimaturas, so that today there are a variety of combinations, which makes it difficult for us to decide which method is the most effective. So if you want to try the traditional method with egg tempera, you can easily make that yourself. You simply need an egg yolk and about the same amount of water, and then you mix these two ingredients really well. The interesting thing is, by the way, that the fatty egg yolk mixes with the water, which it normally wouldn't do. But there is lecithin in the egg yolk, and in this case, it works as an emulsifier. Okay, and after that, we just need white and black pigment, and we can mix it with our tempera to create a paintable medium. And with that, you can paint like you would with normal opaque paints or with acrylic paints. Since I assume that not everybody necessarily wants to get the material to try out layer painting with egg tempera, I thought I would show you a way in which you can explore this technique using modern means. Which means for the grisaille, we will simply use acrylic paints. And I've already coated a poplar plate with acrylic gesso and covered it with a burnt sienna imprimatura, also with acrylic paint. I also did the drawing of the motif that I would like to paint for you now. And all I do now is to first paint my subject using black and white acrylic paint, as if I were painting a black and white photograph. And to do this, I try to mix 4 to 6 shades of grey between white and black, and then blend the transitions so that I end up with around 10 different shades between white and black. And just like egg tempera, the acrylic paint dries pretty quickly, so it's not easy to get smooth transitions. But we have already learned that that doesn't matter, because we can compensate for that later with the glazes of oil paint. Okay, I'm just going to show you the rest of the process in fast motion, because I think it's self-explanatory. And now for the glaze with oil paints. I put typical Old Masters colors on the palette, which are colors that the artists then had available. And these were all relatively translucent colors. Yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and ultramarine are all semi-transparent colors. And I also have white and black. And glazing, we've already seen that in the last part of this course, is really very easy. I mix the respective oil paint with a little linseed oil and then see what happens. Okay, I'll start with the copper jug and see how this works just beautifully. You could, of course, add mixed colors, but I want to make it as simple as possible, so I'm just using one color at a time. And it's actually enough if you apply the paint fairly thin. And I will do the same with the onions now. I just go over them with the diluted yellow ochre, and you can see that you don't need to mix the colors at all. The mixture is done by the grisaille. And if I want to make something lighter again, I can even wipe the color off again. And now to the blue pot. I have to say, ultramarine used to be a very expensive color and wouldn't have been used for such a simple object. An alternative here would be indigo, which also makes a nice shade of blue. But for this painting, I can afford the ultramarine. And you can see the effect here too. You can only get this translucent quality if you layer your colors in very thin glazes on top of each other. Of course, because it's wet now, I can paint into my paint for quite a while. For example, I can add all kinds of hues to the copper jug. I can mix white into my paint, and if I add it in the next layer, I can increase the three-dimensional effect, as we also learned last time. What works again very nicely is this very fine blending of the colors. For anyone who likes to paint very realistically, an underpainting with a grisaille is certainly a very interesting option. I will show you the background and the cloth just in fast motion, because that's self-explanatory again. And I will use burnt sienna and a little bit of all the colors I used for the objects in the foreground. And for the cloth, I will mostly use white. And this brings me to the end of this short series of oil painting for absolute beginners. I hope I was able to give you the most important basics. Oil paints are an incredibly versatile medium and give you plenty of room to experiment. So, thank you for watching and hope to see you next time. Until then, have a very good time. Bye bye.